Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and right now we're taking a look at some of the best camp knives that you can get your hands on right now. Let's check them out. All right, as you can see, we're in my happy place today because I got a bunch of fixed blades here in front of me. And when we're talking camp knives, we're talking about fixed blades in particular. Plenty of great folders you can take with you on a camping trip, and we've done some videos on those. Make sure to leave links to that. But a camp knife is something different. And we're gonna split hairs a little bit because I think there's a difference between a quote-unquote camp knife and a camping knife. Camp knives are really designed around uses at the campsite, at home base, so to speak. So while they may be fairly portable, the size and weight can be a bit bigger than something you might want on, let's say, a hiking knife, for example. Speaking of examples, the Morakniv Companion. Fantastic knife for hikers. Is it a great knife to take with you camping? Absolutely, but not really a camp knife per se. So for the stuff we're gonna look at today, we're focusing on those at camp tasks primarily. And there's kind of two main genres of camp knife, at least in my mind, or two primary tasks you're gonna want to make sure that your camp knife can do well. One of those things is fire tending and maybe some shelter building, depending on what kind of campsite you're engaged in. And things like splitting wood, a little bit of light chopping, or even some heavier chopping, depending on the size of your knife. Just a bigger, beastlier knives that can really take a beating and really power through some wood. And then on the other side of the coin, there's food prep, and related to that, I think as well, is hunting, specifically like breaking down your latest catch, that sort of thing. It kind of gets overlooked a little bit, the food prep aspect. I mean, look at me. If I'm going camping, you better believe I'm eating, and I'm typically going to be eating pretty well. So there's something to be said for having a knife with you that can handle that sort of thing without having to bring an extra kitchen knife along also. And this is especially going to be helpful for folks if you're at a more developed campsite, like a national park or something like that. Most knife use you're going to engage in there probably is prepping food. So let's take a look at some things that are going to kind of cover the ranges of camp knife usage. Now, as you'll see as we go through some of these knives, there's some definite overlap between certain styles of camp knife and other genres, such as bushcraft knives, hunting knives a bit, and especially survival knives in particular. But the first one is kind of going to bridge the gap a little bit between the bushcraft genre and the camp knives. This is the Morakniv Pathfinder. Let me pronounce it right. The Morakniv Pathfinder, and these come in about 90 bucks right now. The big difference between this and most other Moras out there is that longer blade. We've got more reach here that is going to allow us to do some things like batoning, a little bit of light branch chopping. Obviously, this is not a heavy chopper. We've only got about I think these are like a 3mm thick blade spine there with a Scandi grind, which is not, the best chopping grind out there, but a little bit can be done. But primarily, you're going to be able to split wood really well with these. You've got a carbon steel blade, and it's roughly equivalent to 1095, so it's nice and tough as well. The shape out here near the tip, as you can see, there's a fair bit of belly there. Decent slicing profile overall, at least in that respect. Obviously, a full flat grind would be a better slicer, but you have that baked in here. And out of everything on this table, if you are gonna use your primary larger knife to do things like wood carving, making feather sticks, or that sort of thing, this is probably gonna be the best suited to some of those tasks as well. These aren't quite full tang. They have a rubber overmolded handle, but there's plenty of examples out there of people taking this and the smaller bushcraft black, which is essentially the same handle here, and really beating the snot out of these things, and they really pick up, or they really perform quite well. Now the sheath for this guy is a little bit different than a lot of Moras you might be familiar with, in that it's not just a hard plastic sheath. In this case, we've got something with a rigid insert and a belt snap here. And we've actually got MOLLE compatible webbing here on the back, which you can use to attach to certain types of gear, or you just carry it on your belt as normal. But a nice addition here. Everything here is going to have a sheath, but this one is one of those camp knives that still is highly portable. So to have something you can take it with you without taking too much room up on your belt is definitely a nice thing. All right, next we're going to get into some kind of beefier knives, some more heavy-duty things, overbuilt type of things. And we'll start with the budget side of things and work our way up. The first one coming in at a very affordable $38 and change, or about $39 almost, the SCHF 52 from Schrade. This knife is also known as the Frontier, and with it we've got a 7-inch blade, also made out of 1095 carbon steel, so it's good and tough. Fairly thick, about 3/16 of an inch, and that type of thickness is going to be something you want to look for if you do plan to use this heavily on things like batoning or splitting wood. Now, this is held back on that front a little bit because we've got a hollow grind here. Kind of a trade-off there. You do get a finer or a thinner edge right behind the sharpened bit, so you can slice a little bit better, maybe do some of those feather sticking tasks a little bit easier, but it's not going to be quite as durable on the chopping and the splitting wood. Got a nice smooth coating on there. It's going to help with corrosion resistance. Obviously 1095 is not a stainless steel. Handles here are sort of a hard rubber, so they're going to have a little bit of shock absorption capabilities going on. Decent enough length for my slightly larger than average hands. Then you've got a nice choil, full size here on the front that you can use to choke up on. And there's a bit of safety there too, since they didn't grind the edge all the way through that, which is something I appreciate. On the other end of the spectrum, you can also choke back a little bit thanks to the downturn there. Get a little bit more leverage for those chopping needs. The included sheath is nylon, as you can see, and we've even got some nice little considerations here in the front. We've got a fire starter and a sharpening stone already included right there. Not the most high-end knife in the world, I'll grant you, but for less than 40 bucks, you get an awful lot for your money. One quick word about kind of the styling of this knife. It definitely owes a lot to kind of the forebears of this kind of overbuilt survival knife, camp knife crossover genre. And I'm thinking of Becker Knife and Tool. So we're gonna go to one of those originals right now. Made by K-Bar these days, this is the Becker BK2 Companion, coming in just under 100 bucks right now. Again, 1095, in this case 1095 CV, which is slight variant off of the standard, but still kind of right in the same ballpark in terms of performance. American-made construction, 1/4-inch thick steel on this guy with a kind of mid-height or a slightly higher than mid-height saber grind. Just a solid, nigh indestructible piece of steel that has definitely been time proven at this point. You've got a lot of strength for things like splitting wood. This kind of derogatorily sometimes gets referred to as one of the knives that helped kind of kickstart the quote-unquote sharpened pry bar craze, but it's still a highly effective tool, like I said. And then one of the surprising things about this knife, especially given we've only got about a 5 1/4-inch blade, they're not a terrible chopper either. Obviously you're not gonna want it to be your primary thing, but it does a pretty capable job. Again, owing to the spine thickness there a bit, and the geometry overall, and also the handles. They've got a little bit of an area here at the back again, where you can choke back and still have a fairly secure hold. So you get a little more quote-unquote length out of it that way, but again, still reasonable amount of performance given the short length overall. Now they've changed up the material. They've used these on these handles a little bit over the years. Essentially it's plastic is the way to think about it, but they're highly comfortable. You can check out the awesome contours going on. They fill the hand really well. And because of that contouring, you don't need a whole lot of extra texture in order to have a secure grip. It just locks into the hand very well. But if you do want a more premium feel, these are bolt-on, and you can buy micarta handles as an upgrade from K-Bar and from us here at the Knife Center as well. They're real easy. You just pop these screws off, switch them over. The one thing you do lose out on with those micarta versions though is there is a little bit of space inside these handles where you can stash some things potentially. Whether you do or not, the utility there, I always worry about if I lose a knife, I'm losing the survival gear in there as well. But again, it's always good to have options. Now, one thing to note, you've obviously, I'm sure noticed by now, that this one does look a little bit beat up. That's because this one is one of mine from my collection. Normally these come with a coating on it, but I kind of engaged in one of the things a lot of Becker people like to do, which is modifying their knives. I acid etched the logos on both sides, and then I bead blasted away that coating because I tend to prefer a smoother feel overall, and I like a bare metal blade. And I think I had some more plans for this at some point, but I've kind of forgotten what I had planned on doing with them. But it's still a solid knife right out of the box, whether you do stuff like this, do any kind of modification or not. Now there's two different sheaths available. You can get one that's similar to that Schrade, minus the survival goodies, of course, or I like even better this hard plastic version for this particular knife that has a lot of different options for attaching hardware for standard carry, like it comes equipped with, or adding something like a tech lock for other styles of horizontal or inverted carry. A lot of cool stuff there you can do with it, and it snaps in quite nicely. All right, stepping up to another awesome camp knife that's out there these days that I don't think gets quite enough recognition. It's the ESEE Knives Expat Cleaver, the CL1. These come in about $165 right now, and it's very obvious where it gets its name. It is, of course, inspired by meat cleavers. Given that, though, I think this is more of a woodworking camp knife as opposed to a food prepping camp knife, and that's down to the geometries. We've got 3/16 of an inch thick steel, 1095 again. You might be sensing a theme here, but the grind on it is not super acute. It wouldn't satisfy me anyway as my primary food prepping knife in camp. It could do a serviceable job, but this is going to do an awesome job on any kind of chopping or splitting needs, whether in a hunting context or working those logs down into kindling, chopping through some things, making some bigger notches, doing some of that shelter building. It's just one of those knives that does a good job at that sort of thing, and it makes you smile while you're doing it, because it's a big old hunk of steel after all. 5.5 inches long, 1095 like I mentioned, and a really cool kind of black oxide and stone washed finish on top of that. Now, the handles here are G10, and if you're familiar with ESEE's lineup, these are actually the same profile as their Hungless. They call it a machete, but it's more of a big chopper. That actually makes a really good camp knife too, by the way. But it's a good handle for something like this. It's going to be chopping because you have two positions essentially on the handle. You can choke up a little bit for the more detail-oriented stuff. It's going to be a little bit harder on a knife like this because the edge is so far away from the rotational axis of your hand, but you have the option there, and then you can choke back for a bit more leverage on the heavier chops. Moving back to some comments on that detail work a little bit. It's mostly a straight edge, but you do have a little bit of belly here out the front. And if you combine a lanyard here on the back, you can choke up on this knife, wrap the lanyard around your forearm so that the weight is supported, and you wouldn't have the worst time in the world getting in with that bellied section to do maybe a little bit of skinning, some other fine notch work perhaps, but yeah, there's a little bit of extra there right at the tip because of that upturn. As far as the sheath, it's actually a little bit more of a mask since there's no way to attach this to your belt, but it's classic leather. You've got a nice strap going around the side, really great for throwing in your kit, especially your hunting kit or your camp cooking kit, and taking it with you on your trip. All right, so we just talked about a cleaver, so that's a good point to kind of transition into some knives that are still really good do-it-all type of designs, but are going to be a little better for some of that food prep stuff. And again, I'm going to start on the budget side, work our way up. Coming in at about $35, it's the Ontario Hunt Plus Camp Knife. What I like about this is the profile. Obviously, it almost looks like a mini chef's knife, but really, this has a really strong lineage leading back to the old school French style trade knives that were really one of the things that helped this country kind of win the Western frontier back in the trapping and frontier days. It's just got that great kind of shape, about 6 inches, 420 HC steel in this case. We've got a full flat grind, but it's not super thin like a chef's knife would be, so you can still use this for some bigger tasks out there. We're about 5/32 of an inch on the thickness there. The handles are molded over that tang. You got a little bit of a grippy rubber texture there. Feels pretty good in a standard hammer grip or in a pinch grip as well. So you're going to be able to do a pretty broad range of things. It's going to be great for doing some food prep stuff. You've got a little bit of knuckle clearance there. Obviously a great hunting pattern for a slightly larger hunting knife. Really good slicing performance going on here. And the edge is not so far away that you're not going to be able to do the finer carving stuff that you might want to do with it as well. Sheath on it is very simple, almost rudimentary, I'd say. Simple nylon, kind of a flat style there. But again, consider the price of this. Again, just under $35 and American made as well. There's really a lot that I appreciate about that overall. It's priced just right for an American made product like this, very easily affordable, and a very easy suggestion for anyone looking for an inexpensive camp knife. If you want something more premium though, I've got something for that as well. And this is the Camp Cleaver from White River Knives, coming in about $250. Again, also made here in the USA. White River is kind of one of those unsung heroes in my opinion. They're doing fantastic work out there these days, and this knife really shows why. We've got an S35 VN blade, 5.5 inches with a full flat grind. They say Cleaver, and you can see that DNA in there, especially with the hole, but it's almost more of a cross between a Nessmuck and a Cleaver in my mind. And you guys know I love a Nessmuck overall. Good shape, excellent slicing characteristics, obviously, some good rock chopping characteristics on a cutting board, and again, not so far away with the edge like that ESEE was that you can't do some finer carving tasks with it. Not really a chopper per se. You can choke back a little bit on the handles to get a little bit more leverage, but this one overall is a bit more nimble than some of these heavier duty brutes that we've already looked at. Speaking of the handles, got micarta on this one, and they've got a few different options out there. Decent amount of length there. As you can see, my hands are fitting just fine. And to make it easy to carry, they've given us a nice leather sheath here as well. Just simple pouch style, but it feels very high quality on top of that. But not only would this make a great camp knife to my mind, it's certainly agile enough that you could put this in your kitchen and it wouldn't seem out of place. You can also take this hunting just about any day of the week. All right, along similar lines, I've got to talk about the knife that I designed as my kind of personal ideal for a camp knife, the Nordsmith Canteen knife. People ask about the name Canteen knife, and we're talking about the camp kitchen, that definition of canteen, not the not the water bottle, that sort of thing. But this is kind of my blending of a Nessmuck and a little bit of butcher knife, a little bit of kitchen knife DNA, all into my camp knife. These are a bit more expensive than that White River. Key difference between them being these are handcrafted knives as opposed to being a production knife. As such, in this current configuration, these are coming in about $365 right now. And I actually partner with the folks at LT Wright Knives to build these. So if you're familiar with their really bulletproof stuff, you know the kind of quality you're getting with these. Current versions of this knife are at about 5.6 inches of blade, CPM 154 steel, as you can see, 1/8 of an inch thick with that high flat grind. So definitely a little more skewed towards the slicing characteristics as opposed to the chopping, but there is a little bit given over to that in that you've got a little bit of a longer handle here with a swell here at the back that makes it real nice to choke way back on and get a little bit more leverage on the front end of this knife. Again, not a major chopper, but some lighter stuff, it's gonna work very well. The handles, all finished by hand. There's no hot spots going on. Feel really good in your standard grip, and you've got a nice slicing, sweeping profile on the blade when you're holding it like so. It's also a good pinch point for going in and doing stuff on a cutting board like that. And as any good bushcraft knife needs to do, you've got a centerline point so you can still do stuff like drilling and more detailed tip work with it as well. Knife is decently light for carrying around, and as such, you gotta have a good sheath as well. Recently redesigned these not too long ago. We've got black leather going on with a nice snap closure here on the side. And one thing I don't always like about snap closures in general, they tend to kind of wrap over the front, but those can be easy to get snagged as you're walking through the woods. So we moved it around to the back side of the handle here, so it's not gonna get snagged, and it's also gonna stay out of the way when you're pulling the knife in or out, so you're not not accidentally gonna slice it off, which can happen with some designs. Got a nice fire steel loop here on the side, so you can throw one of those on there. 2-position belt loop, essentially. You can carry it in the standard position here, or pull that dangler up to carry it a little bit lower. So I won't spend too much more time on this knife, because you guys are probably gonna accuse me of being biased if I do. But I love this knife. It's done absolutely everything I wanted my camp knife to do. Hopefully you guys will see what I see in it as well. All right, next up, we're gonna start to transition again a little bit. We've got the food prep stuff here. We saw the big bruisers earlier. This next knife is gonna transition a little bit from, well, essentially combining those two things. We're gonna transition from the food prep stuff to some bigger chopping knives, and that great interim step is the Hudson Bay from Condor. Very similar actually to that Ontario we looked at earlier. The Condor Hudson Bay has a very heavy influence from the trapping era in North America here. named for some of the larger fixed blades that were carried in the Hudson Bay area. Also like that Ontario, pretty competitively priced for what you're getting here. It's not American made in this case, but it's coming in about 68 bucks for this 8.5-inch blade of 1075 carbon steel. 1075 is going to be technically a little bit tougher than 1095, so you can do some of the choppy type tasks with it. And what I like about this is it's definitely got some of those chopping chops, so to speak, but it's not getting too unwieldy. It's still pretty easy to manage. Blade thickness isn't so thick that it gets unwieldy, and it's not so long that it gets too forward heavy. It has a little bit of that. But you can kind of see what I'm saying here with that cross between the chopping and batoning and some of the food preppy stuff. Not going to be a primary food prep, I will say that, but for instance, I got a friend I camp with who likes to take his meat smoker everywhere. So if you've got a nice big hunk of meat, this knife is going to look really good slicing pieces off as you go. Edge itself looks like it might be a little bit thick, but looks can be a little bit deceiving because this is actually a convex ground edge that goes a little higher up the shoulder as a result. So it's decently thin behind the edge. It's not a scalpel for sure, but don't let the appearance of that turn you off and make you think it's a super thick edge, because that's definitely not the case. Like a lot of Ontarios, most in fact, it does come with a very high quality leather sheath. Really good thick leather. As Joe Flowers, my friend and also the designer of this knife, likes to say, he always marvels at the quality and the thickness of the leather and goes, man, they must use like half a cow on every knife sheath they put out there. But nothing to worry about with the quality on that knife whatsoever. It's just a really awesome rustic chopper, great camp knife, and decently affordable as well. All right, next up we're going to go to the largest knife on the list, and in a way also has a little bit of that food prep look to it, in that it's going to look really good carving off a big hunk of steak or a big hunk off of a roast. The Tops Knives El Chete, American made, 12-inch 1095 blade, coming in just over 200 bucks, or for this particular one, a little bit more expensive because of the special acid wash finish here. This one's about 260 right now. But this thing is a monster. Like I said, 12 inches, 1/4 inch thick, and it has got a phenomenal shape for really just wailing away on wood. You're going to be able to split really well, really strong on doing those chopping tasks if you're breaking down or bucking down bigger pieces of wood. Micarta handles here have a nice amount of grip. Not the most comfortable things when you compare it to like a Becker. Beckers, of course, are extremely comfortable to my hands, but this is no slouch, I would say, either. It's just a beast of a knife, and for the folks out there that may be questioning why not just use something like a hatchet for your wood splitting and chopping needs at camp, in my mind, a big knife is actually safer. I certainly feel safer using a large knife because hatchets might be a little bit easier to injure yourself with because the cutting edge is so far forward. It kind of tricks your mind where that is, so if you do overshoot something, it can be easier to catch yourself on the leg. But also if you overshoot something with a knife as opposed to that hatchet, you might actually bite in with the edge as opposed to it glancing off. So for those reasons, there are some good safety reasons to be using a large knife over a hatchet. So if you're going to go with a big knife to replace your hatchet, there's something really satisfying about going with something like this. It doesn't, I shouldn't say that. It definitely gets bigger than this, but there's something about this that feels extra large, but perfectly the right size. It's going to work very, very well. Made in the USA, just like pretty much every Tops out there. Now the sheath on this guy is made out of Kydex, slides in quite nicely, and you've got a retention strap here. Pull the dot snap on there as well, so it's only going to open in the one direction. Now they do include a swivel here with a belt loop. Not quite so sure I'd want to belt carry this. It is quite a monster. I mean, what is the weight we're working with here? 29.5 ounces. It's actually not as bad as I thought. But maybe a bandolier if you wanted to carry this, or I would just throw this in the back of the car and have a blast with it when we got to camp. All right, I joked that was, kind of food preppy. Yeah, it would be good for slices. Part of me really wants to take it out and do some, chop up a bunch of onions and vegetables with it. But let's get to some dedicated choppers here. Starting again, not to say that isn't a dedicated chopper. but you know what I mean. But let's start with another budget option, the Kershaw Camp 10. This version coming in right now at just 52 bucks. Now for an affordable chopper, this actually offers quite a lot. We've got tough carbon steel, it's a 65 MN in this case. It does have a smooth coating to help protect it, but there is still, you can see some oil residue on here as well. And you've got a little bit of, it isn't a kukri, but it's got a little bit of that recurve shape that really helps you maximize your chopping power in a shorter blade, which in this case is a 10-inch blade on this knife. Gonna be real good for that chopping stuff, real good for that splitting. But my favorite thing about this whole series is what they've done with the handles. The shape on them is absolutely excellent. You can see a nice swell going on. You've got enough space there to choke back a little bit, get a little bit more leverage. And although I prefer a smoother handle, these are they are textured rubber here. Again, a little bit of a trade-off to get the lower price point. They feel really good. But even more importantly to me, you've got a lanyard hole here at the front for a forward lanyard, which to me is absolutely the safest lanyard method you can use today, because you essentially, we've got some footage we'll splice in where you can put your hand down through the lanyard opening and grip the blade. So if you do happen to drop it while swinging, it doesn't go anywhere. Very cool to see, and especially cool to see on such an affordable camp knife like this. The sheaths on these are also quite good. It's a hard plastic. It doesn't have positive retention, but I like what they've done with the strap here. I mean, remember what I said earlier about straps going around front? I don't like those so much. This guy actually wraps around the back and back over. Don't know if I've not really seen that too much on production blades, so it's really nice, holds in there quite well. Yeah, I dig it. Hard plastic, like I said, you've got some rivets and some slots here with some Velcro webbing here, but you could of course use a tech lock if you wanted. Then you've got your standard belt carry option there. Again, really solid offering, especially for the price. I mean, there are some really good performance bargains to be had here. All right, last but not least, if you're just looking for a jack of all trades camp knife that's high quality and made here in the States, the Becker BK9 gets a look. Coming in these days at about $122. Again, you can see this is not a stock version. This is actually the first Becker I have ever owned, and I would never go to camp without it because I could do just about everything I needed to. I could do some light machete work. Obviously a machete is gonna be better for dedicated stuff. I could chop pretty well with it. I could do batoning, splitting wood really well with it. It's one of those knives that doesn't quit. And despite the size, we're a 9-inch blade here, kind of like that Hudson Bay, not too much. Like, it's still nimble enough. You can get in there, do some finer detail work with it, do some wood carving, feather sticks, take it out with you on a hike. If you want a larger knife with you, it's not gonna be the heaviest thing in the world. And then you can go crazy with it, modifying it as well. Didn't really go crazy here. I just stripped the coating and added the micarta scales here, but it doesn't get much better than a quick, easy, one-size-fits-all suggestion. If you're looking for a camp knife, I know I can pretty much suggest this knife and you're gonna be good to go. As far as the sheath, it is nylon, as you can see here. Some moly webbing there on the back, standard belt loop here. And we've also got a nice pouch here on the front with 2 sections actually. You can put some extra goodies in here. Looks like I've got some sharpeners in there that I forgot about actually. But there's also a small spot for the Becker Remora neck knife there, so you can throw an extra blade into the sheath with that. Really, the Becker BK9, you can't go wrong with it. The Becker heads call it the king for a reason. Check it out. All right, that is all I've got for camp knives today. Love to hear your guys' feedback. You know, I kind of laid out my definition of what I thought a camp knife was, or what I was presenting today, but is it a perfect definition? No, not at all. So I'm eager to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. What is your favorite camp knife? Let us know. Meantime, if you want to get your hands on any of these knives, we'll leave links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And while you're over there, make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program too. Because if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on one of these hard-working knives, you might as well earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. Happy camping, everyone.